Hello everybody, we're the Japanese wine team, and we're so glad to be here. So our main question around our presentation is, can Japanese wine be sold successfully in Latin America? And to answer this question, we have made a really extensive research, and we will show you the outcome so far. So for you to take into account, we have worked in 3 countries, specifically in Latin America, which are Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia. First of all, we worked on L'Orient Winery, which is located in Yamanashi, as you can see. This is a family-run winery business headed by the 3rd generation. So mainly what they're trying to do is to bring the quality of European wine to Japan, using Japanese grapes and international grapes too. Mainly, they asked us about three requests. The first one was to introduce the wine successfully in Latin America, as I said before, specifically in Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina. The second one is to adapt this label to this kind of market. And the third one would be to develop a tourism plan for their winery. We wanted to show you this picture because we've had a really good experience at their winery. And this was really important for our team because we got to know the quality of the wine, the grapes that they have, the Muscat Bellier, and the Koshu wine. We got to really know their business, the history, and how they want to keep that quality and show to the entire world, specifically at this point to Latin America. We want to give you a context first about Latin American market. First, Argentina is the biggest market between these 3 countries, which counts with 835 million liters. The second one would be Brazil, which sold 391 million liters. And the third one, but not least, Colombia with 38 million liters. So we found that the most popular wine here was the red wine in all these 3 countries. We found that they do have differences, but we could find out different opportunities between these countries.
Okay, so based on the market research that Daniela was just talking about, we found out that in the Latin American market, mainly Colombia, Argentina, and Brazil, there's a growing trend for the last few years with the start of the pandemic, in which a portion of the market has been grown, which is the portion of the premium consumers of wine. These type of consumers, we made a profile about them, and they are people who drink wine as a hobby. So they will drink wine most times like daily, on a daily basis, or a few times a week, and they're knowledgeable about drinking wine with food, so they know which wines go with which foods, and they're willing to pay $20 or more for a single bottle of wine. They also have a lifestyle which includes consuming high-end products. So alongside wine, they will have like a luxurious lifestyle. So as I mentioned, based on the market research, we also found out a few opportunities that are present within the Latin American market, mainly based on Japanese food restaurants, e-commerce, and how the markets are relying on imports. So the food restaurants, I would like to just briefly mention that they're a quick growing market. And for the e-commerce, I would like to say that there's a few platforms for online sales that are growing exponentially, which are services like the app Wine in Brazil and the app Vivino, which is like used in different countries. And they work as a subscription service in which people get to choose the wine that they want and get like a personalized experience for ordering wine and consuming it. So as you can see here, the Japanese restaurants in Latin America have been growing exponentially. In just the year 2017, there was at the start of the year 3,600 restaurants, and by the end of the year it grew by 1,500 restaurants, so it reached a level of 4,600 restaurants. And for the e-commerce, there has also been, as you can see in the graph, there has also been a great growth in sales, which is also expected to grow exponentially, as you can see. So finally, for the opportunities, I would like to say that the three markets rely on imports very heavily. So we're in different ways. So for the Brazilian market, wine is like the wine that is mostly consumed is imported wine. So Brazilian wine is produced, but not in that great of an amount. Whereas in Argentina, wine is like produced in a wide amount. So, but like as Daniel mentioned before, the demand in Argentina is huge. It's like compared to Brazil, it's almost double. So the local supply does not meet the requirements of the demand. And finally, for the Colombian market, there's actually no conditions to produce wine in the country. So people need to, like, the whole market is based on wine being imported for the consumers of wine in Colombia.
Recently, there are a lot of Japanese restaurants in Latin America, and they are becoming increasingly popular. We made strategies based on these opportunities. The idea is to enter the high-end Japanese restaurant in Latin America. Why in high-end restaurant? There are two reasons. First, when we bring Japanese wine to Latin America, the price will double due to taxes. When we sell your wine in restaurant, it becomes more expensive. We need to find consumers who can afford that. Second, premium consumers know about food pairing with Japanese food pairing with wines. So they can enjoy combination Japanese food and Yamanashi wine. They will appreciate the value of Japanese Yamanashi wine. That's why we came up with the strategies. Next, I'm talking about e-commerce. As Daniel mentioned earlier, e-commerce market is growing so fast, and distribution costs can be less than supermarket. Therefore, we have two strategies here. First, you can give online discount because you don't need to pay so much for brokers at supermarket. Second, in the e-commerce website, you can put a lot of information about Japanese wine producers and the stories about your wine. This will motivate the consumers to buy your wines. In addition, restaurants in Latin America can contact your winery to start negotiation through online. The key point is we can do it with only e-commerce, not supermarket.
So basically, what is one of the most important key assets and tools for a wine entering the Latin American market? For us, one of these key tools are the labels. So basically, the label has to resemble Japan. It has to bring the Japanese culture with the wine, because in these cases, we got from our surveys that were ran in Brazil, Colombia, and Argentina, what people think about Japan, what image comes to mind when people think about Japan. And these images are Mount Fuji, for example, the sakura, the rising sun, and the Mount Fuji, and also the map of Japan. Also, in all of those labels, there are kanji, which is also something that reminds people of Japan. In this case, it is key and is fundamental for the wine company to enter the market with the Japanese culture in its label, and not trying to simulate or like trying trying to blend in with European wine. It is fundamental that you show the Japanese culture of wine to the Latin American consumer.
To enhance even more our strategy on entering the Latin American market, because we're talking about high-end customers, tourism is one of the business opportunities in Latin America and also to Japanese people. So one of the first idea we have is about language. For tourists and foreigners, language is a big thing, because here in Japan, you don't really have translators, and I think in Yamanashi it's not really easy to find one. So the idea is to have sort of like a museum-like experience with language, where you would translate it and you can do it online. To put a machine in some sort of points in the winery, where people can go through the winery and see and listen to some sort of wine processing things, or about the plantation and things like that, which would be in English. And also you could adapt to other languages such as Chinese, because in Japan you receive a lot of Chinese tourists. And also, I don't know, Korean, you can put other languages there. Now the alliances part, we want to look for alliances here in Yamanashi. So you can partner with a restaurant, for example, so you can make an experience with wine tasting and a food experience where people would understand how Japanese wine can harmonize with Japanese food, and traditional Japanese food or something traditional from Yamanashi. In souvenirs, we thought that for Latin American people especially, we really like souvenirs, and this is something we buy as a memory of our trip. So it is really important that you have an idea of the souvenir, and maybe when you're a winery that we visited, you have a lot of options already. But the idea we had is to create sort of like a mini bottle of wine that people can take home and see that is from the winery itself. And it would work sort of like free publicity, because it would be there as a trophy on people's homes, and people would be interested in the winery as well. The other idea for souvenir we had is also sustainable. You would use the grapes that are not good to make wine to produce cosmetics. So you could produce like a moisturizer made of grapes that you can use, or I don't know, that are already not good enough for eating or selling, and that's the main idea for cosmetics. The wine taxi, we figured out this is something you already have here in Yamanashi. This would work as a taxi, that people would visit the wineries and they wouldn't have to be worried about drinking and going to the wineries to have wine tasting with a food experience and things like that. Our last idea for tourism is a one-day trip from Tokyo. We are really near Tokyo, so you could take like a bus or a train and you would be here like in 2 hours. And the idea is that in one day you would go from Tokyo to Yamanashi and back to Tokyo again. So the first thing we would do, people would get here in Yamanashi, they would go to Shirayuri Winery, they would have a workshop on wine producing or the plantation of the grapes and things like that. After that, they would have the food experience and the wine tasting at a partner restaurant. That this is what we link with the other idea of making alliances with the restaurant. So they would have lunch and they would have the wine tasting at the restaurant, and it would be obviously Shirayuri Winery wine. And then from our research, at least for Latin American people, Mount Fuji is really a plus that you have here in Yamanashi, and this is something really nice and important for foreigners to come and see Mount Fuji. So after the lunch and the wine experience, they would go to Mount Fuji and see and go sightseeing, and then they would buy souvenirs. And it would be Mount Fuji souvenirs, or Also, you could have the experience of the souvenirs at the winery. Now, to finalize our presentation, we wanted to make clear to you that the main idea of our presentation is to take Japanese wine to Latin America, and the main thing here is that Japanese wine is not really known in Latin America, so you would be a pioneer in Latin American market if you took the wine there. And it had to be something Japanese to differentiate from the wines that already exist. For example, in Argentina, they have a really big production in Argentina itself. So it would be something you could differentiate yourself and show the quality of the Japanese wine. So you would embrace the Japanese culture and be a pioneer in the Latin American market. Thank you.